Someone always knocked at my door at odd hours, but vanished before I reached the door. But last night, it responded. I live alone in a narrow, 3-story apartment building that smells like dust and boiled tea. It's the kind of place where sound travels to icy footsteps echo, doors creak, pipes sigh at night like they're tired of being useful. I chose it because it was cheap, quiet, and boring. No drama, no neighbors who lingered in hallways, no surprises. That last part turned out to be wrong. The first knock came at 2:14 a.m. I remember the time because I just rolled over and checked my phone, annoyed that I couldn't sleep. The knock was light, but deliberate. 3 taps, evenly spaced, not aggressive. Not hesitant either. Tap, tap, tap. I lay there staring at the ceiling, waiting for the follow-up. Another knock. A voice. Anything. Nothing. I told myself it was someone on the wrong floor, for a drunk neighbor, or pipes doing something pipe-like. I live on the 2nd floor, Unit 2B. The hallway outside my door is short, barely long enough for 3 doors and a staircase. You can hear everything. I waited a full minute before getting up. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. Lights on, no footsteps fading, no elevator ding. No stairwell door swinging shut, just empty beige carpet and the hum of fluorescent lights. I checked both directions anyway. Down the stairs. Up the stairs. Nothing. I went back to bed, unsettled, but still rational. I didn't sleep much after that, but by morning, the fear had dulled into embarrassment. I felt stupid for letting 3 knocks get to me. Then it happened again. 3 nights later. 1:47 a.m. Same pattern, 3 taps, same spacing, same softness. This time I sat up immediately. The sound hadn't come from the wall, or the ceiling, or another unit. It was my door. I was certain. I didn't move right away. I listened. Silence. No shuffling, no breathing, no retreating footsteps. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and opened the door faster than last time, half expecting to catch someone mid-turn. The hallway was empty again. What bothered me wasn't just the absence. It was how complete it was, like no one had ever been there. No disturbance in the air. No residual presence. I leaned out and looked over the railing down to the 1st floor. The stairwell light was on. No one. I started checking the time after that. The knocks didn't follow a pattern. Sometimes midnight. Sometimes closer to 3. Always after dark. Always 3 taps. Never a voice. Never anyone there when I opened the door. A week in, I mentioned it to my downstairs neighbor, Mrs. Han. She's been in the building longer than anyone, always sweeping the shared hallway like she owns it. Do you hear knocking at night? I asked, trying to sound casual. She frowned. From pipes? No, from doors. She shook her head immediately. No. Nights are quiet here. I pressed a little. Asked if anyone else had complained. If there were kids in the building. Sleepwalkers. Anything. She just looked at me strangely and said, if someone knocked, you would hear them leave. That stuck with me. Because she was right. The stairwell echoes. The floor creaks. Even careful footsteps make noise. But whoever or whatever was knocking never made a sound beyond those 3 taps. I started waiting behind the door when I felt tired enough that I knew I'd sleep deeply. Like I could catch it in the act. It never knocked when I waited, only when I was already in bed, already relaxed, already vulnerable. The 10th night, I did something stupid. It knocked at 2:02 a.m. 3 taps. I rushed the door and yanked it open without checking the peephole. The hallway was empty. But this time, something was different. The air felt wrong. Cooler, like I'd opened the door to a stairwell instead of a hallway. I stepped out barefoot, scanning both directions, and then I noticed the elevator. The doors were open. They're never open unless someone's using it. I stood there, heart pounding, staring into the empty elevator car. The light inside flickered faintly, buzzing. I didn't hear it arrive. Didn't hear it stop. I didn't step inside. I backed into my apartment and locked the door. That night, I dreamed of knocking. Endless knocking. Not on my door, but from the inside of it. Like something trapped between the door and the frame, tapping to be let out. I woke up with my heart racing and my hand pressed flat against the wood. The next morning, I checked the building's notice board. No announcements, no maintenance warnings, no elevator issues listed. Out of curiosity, I checked the building directory. That's when I noticed something else. There are 6 units per floor, but on the 2nd floor, only 5 are listed. 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, 2F. I stared at it for a long time, trying to convince myself it was a typo. I've lived here for 8 months, and I've never once wondered where 2E was. That night, the knock came earlier than ever. 11 p.m. 3 taps, but this time, before I could even stand up, there was a 4th. Slower. Heavier. Like knuckles settling into place. And then, right against the door, so close I felt the vibration through the wood. Someone whispered my name. I didn't answer the door. I didn't move at all. My body locked in place, every muscle tight. Like if I stayed perfectly still, the sound might rewind itself and go back to being impossible. My name hadn't been shouted. It hadn't even been spoken clearly. It was breathed, low and close, like someone testing whether the sound of it still belonged to me. I stood there in the dark, hand hovering uselessly over the deadbolt, staring at the thin sliver of light under the door. Nothing else happened. No more knocking, no footsteps retreating, no elevator, no stairwell door. Just silence so complete it felt manufactured. I stayed there for almost an hour before backing away, every step careful, as if the floor itself might react. I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed with my phone in my hand, screen glowing, watching the time crawl forward. At midnight, my phone buzzed. A notification from my building's resident group chat, something I'd forgotten I was even part of. Unknown number. Did you hear that too? My stomach dropped. I typed back immediately. Hear what? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. The knocking, the message finally said. On the 2nd floor. I stared at the screen, pulse pounding. Which apartment? I typed. The response took longer this time. That's the thing, the message read. I can't tell. I asked who it was. No answer. I asked where they lived. Nothing. I watched the chat list updates, someone typing, stopping, typing again, but no message came through. Finally, I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Did it say your name? The typing dots appeared once, stayed longer than before, then vanished. The next morning, I knocked on doors. I started with 2A, no answer. 2C empty, according to the directory. 2D answered after a long pause. A middle-aged man with tired eyes who looked irritated to see me. Did you hear knocking last night? I asked. He frowned. No. Did you hear anyone in the hallway? Late? No. I hesitated. Have you ever heard someone knocking on doors and then disappearing? His expression hardened. Are you accusing me of something? No, I work early, he snapped. Don't knock on my door again. 2F didn't answer at all. That left 2E. The space where 2E should have been wasn't a door. It was a section of wall, painted the same off-white as the rest of the hallway. Uninterrupted except for a faint rectangular outline that only became visible when the light hit it just right. I stood there for a long time, heart pounding, tracing the edges with my eyes. It was the size of a door, but flatter, like something pressed over it from the inside. I reached out without thinking and touched the wall. It was warm. I jerked my hand back as if burned. That night, I didn't wait in bed. I sat in the dark living room with all the lights off, watching my door. I wanted to see it. Whoever it was, whatever it was. I wanted proof that I wasn't unraveling. At 12:58 a.m., the hallway lights flickered. At 1:03 a.m., I heard movement. Not footsteps. Not exactly. More like a careful redistribution of weight, a presence settling into place. Then the knock came. Tap, tap, tap. I stayed still. A pause. Then the 4th knock. Slow. Intentional. My breath caught. This time, it didn't whisper my name. This time, it spoke clearly. Open the door. The voice was wrong. Not distorted. Not monstrous. Just empty, like someone reading words without understanding them. I backed away until my shoulders hit the wall. Please, it added. I felt my chest tighten. My hand twitched toward the door before my mind caught up. The word please did something to me. It sounded practiced, learned. I know you're there, it said. You always are. I didn't respond. The silence stretched. Then came a sound I hadn't heard before. Scraping. Not nails, not metal. Something broad, dragging lightly along the surface of the door, as if feeling for seams. The handle rattled. Not turning. Just testing. Locked. Wrong, the voice said softly. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them again, the hallway light under the door was gone. The next day, I took off work. I went to the leasing office across town, a cramped space with faded posters, and a single employee who looked permanently exhausted. I explained the knocking. The missing apartment number. The wall. She listened without interrupting, fingers slowly tightening around her pen. When I finished, she sighed and pulled out a folder. You're not the first to ask about that, she said. Ask about what? I said. She hesitated. The numbering. Where is Tui? I asked. She flipped through papers. There used to be an apartment there. Used to be. What happened to it? Renovations, she said too quickly. What kind of renovations remove a unit entirely? She didn't answer that. Instead, she slid a paper across the desk. A floor plan. The 2nd floor showed 6 units. Tui was there, exactly where I thought it should be. What happened to the tenant? I asked. She closed the folder. The unit was decommissioned. Why? Another pause. Longer this time. There were complaints, she said, about disturbances. Knocking? I asked. Her eyes flicked up to mine. Voices, she said. Doors opening when they shouldn't. People claiming someone was standing outside for hours. I swallowed. Where did the tenant go? She shook her head. They didn't. My blood ran cold. What do you mean they didn't? She leaned back in her chair. The tenant moved out, but the disturbances didn't stop. I left before she could say anything else. That night, I stayed awake with every light on. The knocking didn't come. Instead, my phone buzzed at dawn. A new message from the unknown number. It doesn't like the lights. Another message followed immediately. It likes doors better. And then, as if on cue, something heavy pressed against my door from the outside. Not knocking, leaning, as if learning how much force it could apply without being noticed. I watched the handle tremble, and for the first time, I realized something worse than fear. Whatever was outside my door was no longer just visiting. It was settling in. I didn't stay in my apartment that night. I don't mean I slept on the couch or barricaded myself in the bedroom. I left, grabbed my phone, wallet, keys, and walked out the front door while whatever was leaning against it leaned back just enough for me to slip past. I didn't look at it. I couldn't. I kept my eyes on the carpet and moved fast, heart hammering so hard I thought it might give me away. The hallway felt longer than it ever had before. Each step echoed too loudly, like I was announcing myself. I half expected the lights to flicker out or the elevator to open again without warning. Nothing happened. I took the stairs two at a time and didn't stop until I was outside, gulping cold air like I'd been underwater too long. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour before pulling into a 25-hour diner on the edge of town. I sat in a booth with my back against the wall and watched the door until my hands stopped shaking. By morning, exhaustion had dulled the fear into something heavier and more dangerous curiosity, because the thing that bothered me most wasn't the knocking anymore. It was the message. It doesn't like the lights. Whoever or whatever had sent that knew something, not just about the knocking, but about its behavior, its preferences, that implied observation, or experience. I spent the next day trying to track down the unknown number. Burner phone? No carrier data, no history. Whoever had contacted me had gone out of their way to remain untraceable. I skipped work again and returned to the building in daylight, convincing myself things would look different with the sun up. They didn't. The hallway felt the same. Too narrow. Too quiet. The wall where Tui should have been looked flatter than I remembered. The faint rectangular outline more visible now that I knew to look for it. I pressed my ear against it. Nothing. I knocked. Not hard, just once. The sound was wrong. Muted, absorbed, like knocking on something padded. I pulled my hand back, suddenly aware of how close my face was to the wall. How vulnerable that made me. I stepped away, heart racing. That night, I stayed at a friend's place. The knocking didn't follow me. No messages, no sounds. For the first time in weeks, I slept. The relief was short-lived. When I returned to my apartment the next evening, my front door was ajar. Not wide open, just cracked. The lock was still intact. No damage, no sign of forced entry. I stood there for a long moment, keys clenched in my hand, listening. Silence. I pushed the door open slowly. Everything inside looked normal at first glance. Furniture untouched, no obvious signs of intrusion. But the air felt stale, like the apartment had been sealed shut for a long time. Then I noticed the dust. On the floor, faint footprints led from my door toward the wall where two E's should have been. They weren't shoe prints, they were bare feet. Longer than mine, narrow, toes slightly too close together as if they weren't used often. The print stopped inches from the wall. Not faded, not smudged, just ended. I backed away, pulse roaring in my ears. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another message, "You left your door unlocked." I stared at the screen, then at the wall. "No," I whispered. "I didn't." The reply came instantly. "You always do." I left again. That time, I didn't even lock the door behind me. Over the next few days, the messages continued. Not constant, not spammy, just enough to let me know I was being watched. "You walk too softly." "You check the peephole every time." "You should sleep more." Each one felt like a finger tracing the outline of my life, learning where to press. I tried staying elsewhere, friends, hotels, even my car. The knocking never followed, but the messages did, always commenting on what I'd done hours earlier. Always accurate. I stopped responding, stopped opening them at all. That's when the knocking changed. It stopped being limited to my apartment. The first time it happened elsewhere, I was staying with a coworker across town. We were watching TV when there was a knock at the door. 3 taps. Even spacing? My stomach dropped. My coworker frowned. "You expecting someone?" I shook my head, heart racing. He went to the door before I could stop him. Opened it. No one was there. The hallway outside his unit was empty. "Kids messing around," he said, shrugging. But I knew better. That night, I dreamt of doors, endless doors, lined up in a hallway that bent and folded back on itself. Behind every door, I could hear breathing. When I woke up, my phone had another message. "Doors don't belong to anyone." I started researching the building obsessively. Old records, archived news articles, zoning permits. Anything that mentioned renovations, removals, disappearances. It took hours, but eventually I found something. A brief article from over a decade ago, buried deep in the archives of a local paper. No headline photo, no follow-up. Tenant missing after noise complaints. The article described a resident on the second floor who'd repeatedly called management to complain about someone knocking on their door at night, about hearing movement in the hallway when no one was there, about a neighbor who never answered but was always standing just outside. The tenant disappeared one night, left behind personal belongings, no sign of forced entry. The apartment number wasn't listed, but the floor was second. I scrolled through the comments. Most were jokes, a few speculated about mental illness. One stood out. If you hear it knock, don't answer. If it stops knocking, don't open. If it learns your name, it's already too late. The comment was posted from a deleted account, timestamped the same week the tenant vanished. That night, I returned to my apartment one last time. I needed to see it again. The wall, the door, the space that shouldn't exist. The hallway lights flickered as I approached. I stood in front of my door, breathing shallowly. The wall beside it felt closer than ever. Then without warning, the knocking came. Not on my door. On the wall. From inside. Tap, tap, tap. The outline of the hidden doorway deepened, pressing outward like something on the other side was testing the surface. I staggered back as the wall bulged slightly. Then a voice clear, calm, unmistakably familiar spoke from behind it. I'm almost ready. My voice. My exact voice. I ran. Behind me, something knocked once more. Not 3 times. Just once. Like it no longer needed to ask. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned and my legs shook beneath me. I don't remember getting out of the building. I don't remember the stairs or the door or the street. I only remember the sound following me, not footsteps, not pursuit, but something worse. The absence of sound. Like whatever had spoken wasn't constrained by distance anymore. I drove until the city thinned into long, dark stretches of road. I pulled over in a grocery store parking lot that stayed lit all night and sat there with the engine running, hands locked around the steering wheel, replaying the voice in my head. I'm almost ready. It hadn't sounded like a threat. It had sounded satisfied. I didn't go back to the apartment. I didn't even go back to my friend's place. I checked into a motel under a fake name and paid cash. The room smelled like bleach and old carpet, but I welcomed it. New space, new doors, no history. I stacked a chair against the door before lying down. Sleep didn't come easily, but exhaustion eventually dragged me under. I woke up to knocking. 3 taps. Not on the motel door, on the bathroom door inside my room. I shot upright, heart slamming so hard it hurt. My eyes locked onto the bathroom door across the room. It was closed. I hadn't closed it. Hello? I croaked, hating how small my voice sounded. No answer. I stayed frozen, staring at the door until my eyes burned. When nothing else happened, I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, keeping the beam trained ahead of me as I stood. The bathroom was empty. Shower curtain pulled back, window locked. No vents large enough for anything to crawl through. But on the inside of the bathroom door at eye level was a faint handprint. Not smeared, pressed. Like someone had leaned there, waiting. I checked out immediately. Over the next few days, my life collapsed into motion. I didn't stay anywhere longer than a few hours. Cafes, libraries, bus stations, anywhere with people, noise, exits. The knocking didn't always follow, but the sense of being observed did. And then the messages changed. They stopped describing what I was doing. They started predicting it. You'll check behind you in 3 seconds. I did. You won't leave yet. I stayed. You're thinking about calling someone. My phone buzzed again. Don't. I threw the phone across the room, earning startled looks from strangers. My hands shook as I retrieved it, dread pooling low in my gut. The number hadn't changed. The sender hadn't changed. Only the confidence. I finally did what I should have done weeks ago. I went to the police. I told them everything, the knocking, the missing apartment, the messages, the voice. I left out the parts that made me sound unhinged, but even the edited version earned me a long, patient look from the officer across the desk. Do you have proof of the messages? He asked. I pulled out my phone. My inbox was empty. No texts, no notifications, no record of the number ever existing. My throat tightened. That's not possible. He nodded slowly. Have you been under a lot of stress? I left without filing a report. That night, I dreamed again. This time I wasn't running. I was standing in the hallway of my building, staring at the wall where 2E should be. The outline pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. From behind it, I heard movement, not knocking, but footsteps pacing back and forth. Practicing. When I woke up, I knew what it was doing. It wasn't haunting me. It was rehearsing. I returned to the building in daylight, driven by a need I couldn't articulate. Closure. Control. Proof. The hallway was empty. Quiet. Ordinary. I stood in front of the wall and pressed both palms against it. It was warmer than the surrounding walls, and then it pressed back. Not hard, just enough to meet me. I stumbled away, breath hitching. You can't have me, I whispered. The wall vibrated. Not knocking. Laughter. Muffled, distorted, but unmistakably mine. I realized then what the knocks had been. Not requests. Measurements. each door it tested, each person it observed. It was learning where doors ended and people began. Learning how to stand in the space between. That night, the messages returned. You understand now. You're making room. I won't, I said aloud, alone in my car. I won't let you. The reply came immediately. You already did. The next morning, my coworker called me, voice shaking. You were at my place last night, he said. I laughed, sharp and panicked. No, I wasn't. Yes, you were, he insisted. You knocked. You said my name. When I opened the door, he stopped. When I opened the door, he repeated slowly. There was no one there. My blood ran cold. But you heard me, I said. Yes, he whispered. I heard you breathing. I hung up. The realization hit me with sickening clarity. It didn't need to follow me everywhere. It could send me ahead, using my voice, my patterns, my familiarity. It wasn't replacing me. It was expanding. I don't know how many people it's tested now, how many doors it's knocked on, how many names it's learned. I only know that last night, as I sat alone in a crowded train station, my phone buzzed one final time. Tonight, you don't have to run. Across the station, someone turned toward me. They had my face, my posture, my tired eyes. They smiled softly and raised their hand. Then, from directly behind me, 3 taps sounded against a door that wasn't there. I didn't turn around. That was the first choice I made that wasn't driven by fear. The 3 taps echoed behind me, clear, solid, impossible, and every instinct screamed to face it, to confirm the shape, the lie, the reflection. But I didn't. I stayed seated on the cold metal bench, staring straight ahead at the arrivals board as it flickered and refreshed. Across the station, the thing wearing my face lowered its hand. It didn't look disappointed. It looked corrected, like a mistake had just been fixed. I felt it then. Not attention, not awareness, not fear, but alignment. A pressure behind my eyes, subtle and invasive, like a thought trying to settle where it didn't belong. Memories surfaced that weren't mine. Not visions. Not hallucinations. Procedures. Rules. The knocking had never been about being noticed. It had been about consent. Not permission in the obvious sense. Not opening doors. Not answering. Consent in the structural sense. Every time I hesitated before opening the door, every time I waited, every time I wondered, should I had paused the boundary, made it flexible, negotiable. Doors, I realized too late, aren't barriers. They're agreements. The station announcement crackled overhead, breaking my focus. A train arriving? People stood, shifted, gathered bags. Normalcy surged around me like a tide. The thing across the station turned and blended into the crowd. I didn't follow. I stayed until the platform cleared. Only then did I stand and walk, not run toward the exit. Outside, dawn was beginning to stretch pale fingers across the sky. The city looked the same. That felt wrong. After everything, I'd expected the world to be altered, tilted, revealed. Instead, it continued. That's when I understood, at the final piece. It wasn't trying to replace individuals. It was correcting layouts, spaces, transitions. I spent the next week doing something that would have sounded insane to me before all this. I went back to the building, not my apartment, not the hallway, the infrastructure. I requested access to maintenance schematics through the city, filed noise complaints, safety concerns. I spoke the language of bureaucracy fluently enough to be dangerous. It took time, but eventually I got what I needed, a structural inspection. They found it on the second day. Not a room. A void. A pocket between walls that shouldn't have existed, left behind after a renovation decades earlier. Not sealed properly, not reinforced, a negative space that ran vertically through the building like a throat. The inspectors argued about how it happened, about whose fault it was, about liability. No one asked why the temperature inside the void was several degrees warmer than the surrounding structure. No one asked why sound traveled strangely through it. No one asked why doors on that floor had higher than average replacement rates. They scheduled a full remediation. Concrete fill. Permanent. The night before the work began, I returned one last time. I stood in the hallway alone, facing the wall that had never been a wall. I'm not giving you anything, I said quietly. I'm taking it away. The surface rippled. Not violently. Resigned. The outline of the hidden door appeared clearly for the first time, as if relieved to finally be acknowledged as what it was. I saw now that it had never been a door to a place. It was a door to a gap. Something meant to be passed through, not inhabited. You won't fit anymore, I said. The wall knocked once from the inside. Not asking, acknowledging. The next day, they filled it. I watched from the street as trucks came and went, as wet concrete disappeared into the building's unseen veins. The work took hours. When it was done, the second floor had no voids, no inconsistencies, no place for sound to gather unnaturally. The knocking stopped. Everywhere. Weeks passed, then months. No messages, no dreams, no reflections that lingered too long. People forgot about the missing tenant, about the complaints, about the door that never was. I didn't, because something else changed. I noticed doors differently now. Not just physical ones, social ones, conversational ones. The subtle boundaries people open without realizing it, hesitations, invitations, pauses that say, you can come closer now. I stopped doing that. I answer doors only when I'm expecting someone. I don't stand in thresholds. I don't linger in maybes. Because what I learned, what it never said out loud, is that some things aren't predators. They're consequences. They don't chase you. They occupy the space you failed to define. And if a neighbor ever knocks at odd hours and disappears before you answer, don't wonder who it is. Ask yourself what kind of space you're leaving open. Then close it.